live for my very first live stream here. For this show, it's a very special reunion show. I'm very happy to have some of my former colleagues from Reaxxion with me, Samuel Roberts and Chris Bechtloff. How are you guys doing tonight?
Doing pretty good.
Doing well.
Excellent. Glad to hear it. So what have you guys been up to lately?
I just came back from a couple months overseas and back to California, and yeah, it's rather astonishing. You don't really realize how bad things are until you go away for a while and come back. This is basically the third world. It's just amazing.
Oh yeah, tell me about it. Of course, I've experienced that when you and I last met up in person. Believe it or not, that happened.
Right, it was good times.
Well, I've just been, working on my channel mostly. I do a Saturday night live stream every Saturday night, obviously, with a bunch of different shitlords talking about topics of the week.
Of course. Yeah, I tune into that every once in a while. Glad you guys are both keeping busy here. So yeah, we'll go ahead and jump into current events. I figured one of the things we cover is it looks like Marvel has decided to admit that there's some mistakes made with the political correctness route. Any thoughts on that?
Well, they're not learning the right lesson there. The CEO or whoever it was, the higher up, that wasn't the CEO, but it was one of the higher ups, was all like, "Oh, this clearly means nobody wants to read about black characters and female characters." And I mean, part of the problem was you were intent on replacing every white male you possibly could with some sort of minority, but also it was just the quality of the writing. Most people aren't mad that Sam Wilson is Captain America for a little while. Marvel has people replace their heroes here and there all the time. No, they're mad because when they pick it up, it's Black Lives Matter, the comic book. It's much more an issue of the quality of writing. And yes, with replacement characters, it's the sheer volume of them all at once too. But the lesson here isn't that Sam Wilson can never take over for Captain America. It's that this writer is terrible and he should be fired.
Of course. I'm with you 100% on that. I actually dropped that maybe after the second issue. That sounds about right.
Wow, you guys are among the very few who actually read those comics now. I feel like I'm in the presence of an endangered species.
I don't read any Marvel comics anymore, and it's really telling because, I mean, Marvel characters, Marvel IPs, whatever, they've never been more popular. There's never been more interest in their characters, and they can't sell a comic book to save their soul. Now, I know not everyone who goes and sees those movies and loves them is going to pick up a comic book, but some of them are. So they should have seen at least some uptick in comic book sales.
I had always assumed that the reason for those comics was essentially to keep the IP going, that there was some kind of contractual reason that is what I'd heard, that the IP needs to be kept going in comics or it reverts to the original creators. And so
there's a little bit of that, but that's more at DC.
Okay.
Because most of the big properties at Marvel were created by Stan Lee. And I mean,
that makes sense.
He owns significant stock in the company, or he did before Disney bought him. And he's rich enough that he doesn't have to fight over Spider-Man royalties or anything like that.
That makes sense.
There's a little bit of that
really,
but
yeah, it really felt for a long, long time that the comics were essentially a playground for lottery winners, is really the best way I could think of it. You won the comics lottery. You got hired by Marvel out of 10 billion comic writers who could be doing the job, and now you can just make whatever Spider-Man comics you want, and no one cares. It doesn't matter how many people read them. It doesn't matter what kind of stories you write, because we're not selling any of these things anyway.
Well, there's always been some of that at DC, because Warner Brothers has owned DC since I want to say like the 70s at least. So there's always been some of that at DC because there was a big parent company behind it. And it was basically like, you know, this will be an idea farm where maybe we can get good ideas for TV shows and movies out of. And also, you know, we'll sell merchandise, we'll make cartoons. That was always the moneymaker. With Marvel, Marvel had to sell comics for much of its existence to survive. You know, it was only 7-8 years ago that that Marvel was bought up by Disney. And in fact, when they launched their Avengers movie stuff, their Marvel Studios, they actually had to use like characters as collateral. That a bunch of their IPs were actually on the line for them continuing to own them for collateral. That was a big ballsy move for them at the time. But historically, Marvel has had to sell comics to survive. At the very least, enough comics to keep people interested in buying merchandise and making cartoons and all. But I mean, Marvel went bankrupt in the 90s.
Oh yeah.
You know, they were a comic book company far more than DC was. Now, right now, yeah, they can get away with losing money because Disney owns them primarily because Disney wants to make movies. They want to make merchandise. They want to make cartoons. I assume, eventually want to make rides at their theme park. I don't know when the Universal Park's going to lose the rights to that.
I think there's some co-shared rides, co-shared deals on that because I hear California Adventure is getting a Guardians of the Galaxy attraction.
I have to imagine that when you make theme park rides, you have the rights for a good long time. So even if rides pop up at Disney soon, I doubt the stuff at Universal is going away anytime soon.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, that's why Disney owns Marvel. They want to do all that stuff. But the thing of that is that if the comics are terrible for too long, never mind the sales, eventually no one will want to see the movies. Eventually you'll so poison the brand that you can't sell merchandise and rides and t-shirts and toys and movie tickets and cartoon shows and all that other stuff. You know, so there, I think there was a point here where some higher up might have stepped in and said, you need to reverse this. This is inexcusable. Because again, they couldn't sell comics to save their souls.
Do you have any idea what the actual sales numbers were for some of these things?
From what I understood here recently, about 500,000 was a high-selling comic book for Marvel. And even that is misleading because comic book sales charts have never been that accurate. They much more reflect what comic book stores buy than what they actually sell. So when stuff sits on the shelf, a lot of times that's seen as a sell. So I would argue the numbers are probably much, much lower than that. And again, to me, that's inexcusable. Again, like I said, not everybody who goes and sees Captain America and says, wow, these are awesome movies, I want to know more about this guy, is necessarily going to buy a comic book. But some of them are.
True.
So at the very least, we should have seen upticks in sales these last 5 years.
Well, I mean, I can give myself as an example, and this isn't specifically SJW related, but I got real into the Arkham Asylum game, as I'm sure you guys probably did too. Wonderful game. I got into this. I got all the Riddler trophies, did all the shit, and I'm like, well, I'm going to read a comic book. I'm going to read, you know, Batman's going to punch out the Penguin or throw the Riddler through a window or maybe get gloomy about his parents, all the typical Batman shit, right? Instead, I look at the comic and Batman is dead because he was killed by some interdimensional guy with a laser pistol. It was just something that was just utterly un-Batman. I didn't even recognize the name. I think it was Darkseid or something.
Yeah, he was killed in a Justice League story.
Yeah, okay, it had nothing to do with fucking Batman. It was so obviously something that would really, really appeal to someone who had been studiously reading every Batman and Superman comic for the last 30 years. For me, I don't give a shit about fucking Darkseid. I want to read Batman. I want to buy Batman, and I want to read some fucking Batman. I want to see him, you know, drive around in the Batmobile, loses his wheels, and Joker lays an egg or some shit like that. I don't know.
Right.
So
Well,
it
DC
really felt
DC admitted at the time that they dropped the ball on
Mhm.
that, because what they also weren't doing is, so okay, the Batman books were at this current status quo.
Mhm.
What they weren't doing is they had an influx of new readers, and they weren't doing a good job of explaining things
Mhm.
to people. Because I mean, look, continuity. Everybody says continuity is a bad thing. I would argue that if you're doing continuity well, you have tons of jumping on points, but no real jumping off point. That's when you're doing it well. But again, they weren't even out there significantly with a lot of trade paperbacks, a lot of reprints, a lot of they were really dropping the ball in marketing with that. And it was right at a time when the Nolan movies were hot, the game was hot.
Mhm.
They didn't have a place for newer Batman fans to go right when they had an influx of it. And DC has admitted that. But again, I don't really think, when done right, I don't think it's the replacement characters or the different status quo that turns people off. Like I said, I don't think somebody who goes and sees the Captain America movies and goes and reads that comic book is going to necessarily immediately be turned off by Sam Wilson's Captain America. They might, but they might also say, okay, well, the comic book's further along, and okay, I know Sam Wilson, he's into movies too, all right. But again, it comes down to a quality issue more than anything else. That comic book is bad. Regardless, it doesn't matter if you know Captain America or not. It doesn't matter whether you want Sam Wilson to be Captain America or not. That comic book is terrible.
Yeah.
I speak kind of because I'm much more from the anime manga kind of realm. And personally, I think that the biggest testament to how utterly failed the US comic book industry is the success of manga in the US. I think there is no more damning fact than that by and large, people would rather read stories from across the pond from a completely different civilization that, honestly aren't that well written. Most manga is shit. And just it's so successful not because of any merits it has, but just because the American stuff is so utterly unforgivably bad, and there's no way to get into it. Like you said, there's no jumping on point. If I wanted to go, read fucking Batman, I have no idea what I'd do. I don't know where I'd go. I don't know how I'd read it. There's like a dozen of every one of these comics. Like there's like 5 Superman or Spider-Man comics running at any one time, aren't there?
Usually, yeah, a franchise gets multiple books going on. What I found, actually, I was running a comic book stand at a flea market past few years, is I found, and it was mostly back issues, I found that every time a new Marvel movie came out, I saw massive influxes of like Captain America, Thor, and Iron Man issues going out the door, and I never saw Avengers move up that much.
Huh.
And I think it was because a lot of times, almost everyone has been in the Avengers at some point or another. You have rotating memberships and whatnot.
Mhm.
So, you go see these movies and you're like, I want to read Avengers. And, you pick up an Avengers comic and on the cover is Wolverine, Thing, and Spider-Man. And you don't necessarily know what to make of that. But again, that's stuff they could deal with that better. Every time DC tries to do a reboot to quote unquote clean up their continuity, they don't realize they just make things fucking worse. It just makes things more complicated, because then you have full on different sets of continuity, which become more convoluted and thick. I mean, you could a comic book fan could spend 4 hours trying to explain Hawkman's history to you.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
I don't know how interested I am in Hawkman's history, to be honest.
Well, it's a good thing too, because I don't think anybody can keep track of it anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's.
Well, I was going to say, as far as jumping on points were, when I first started reading Marvel issues, I want to say it might have been around 2010, 2009, somewhere in there. I jumped in with the event, or before the event, Fear Itself, which really wasn't that good of an event, but at the same time, I think Iron Man 2 had just come out, so I was one of those people that fell under the motion picture umbrella. And at the time, I had heard like the mid 2000s stuff. They had some pretty interesting storytelling that went on. That's what attracted me to comics.
I mean, to some extent, everybody has the internet now. So continuity, like, you can do a little bit of research. You can go online. You can look at the fan sites.
Yeah, I can.
I mean, there is some basic,
or I can pick up, fucking One Piece.
Like, I wouldn't try to get into manga without doing at least a little bit of research of what the hell's good, what the hell I might like.
Yeah.
I mean, I had people come up to me sometimes and like, I want to get into comics. What should I read? And I'm like, I don't fucking know. There's like 8 million different kinds of superhero stories. Somebody who likes Ghost Rider might not necessarily like Avengers.
But it's fairly easy to, I think, look at, you can look at the cover of Ghost Rider, and hopefully there's going to be, a dude on a motorcycle with a glowing skull face and giant chains, though for all I know, he's now like a retired construction worker in Saskatchewan dealing with an alcoholism problem.
Well, part of the problem at Marvel right now is, again, replacement characters aren't necessarily a bad idea. All right, some hero is out of commission for whatever reason. Somebody else takes over the mantle for a while. That can be a very interesting change of pace for a while. Mm-hmm. When you do it to like all of them at once, then it doesn't even make it that interesting, because part of the interesting aspect of, say, having Sam Wilson take over for Captain America, wouldn't part of the interesting aspect be how he interacts with the rest of the Avengers? No, because they're all fucking replaced by black transsexual Muslims in wheelchairs at this point. So there is no, none of that's even there. It's the sheer volume of it. I mean, I started reading comic books in 1995 when Marvel had 30 years worth of history behind it. And I had no problem getting into it. I really didn't, because I had watched the X-Men and Spider-Man cartoons, so I knew a decent amount about them. Again, stuff like cartoons and movies are what gets people into it. You at least have, even if it's going to be different in a comic book, you at least have some grasp of what to expect. But at the time, I couldn't get into Avengers because everything was a fucking mess in Avengers in the mid-90s. Even though I wanted to, I was familiar with Iron Man and Captain America and stuff. I wanted to get into them, and they were a mess. But stuff like Spider-Man, X-Men, I had no problem getting into that. I had no problem getting into Batman at the time. And even that was a little bit different. Like, I didn't know there were multiple Robins in the Batman comic at the time, but it caught on. Okay, there's, the old Robin's now Nightwing. It's not hard to catch people up. It's just that a lot of times writers don't bother to do it.
Mm-hmm. All right. So with that being transferred, I know, Sam, you went ahead and you brought up the issue of Manga. Another news piece that's really happening is lately the outrage over Ghost in the Shell, or rather now lack of outrage.
Poor Ghost in the Shell. I feel kind of bad because, like, last week I was talking with some Japanese creators who are trying to model their work for a Western audience. And they're like, Ghost in the Shell is popular, right? And I was like, yeah, they're making that movie. The movie fucking flops. God, no. We'll see if they ever come to me for advice again.
I don't understand the whitewashing argument, because, I mean, if you were adapting a property to a new culture, wouldn't you adapt it thoroughly? I mean, like...
There is, and I'm sure you're both aware of this, there is a substantial subset of people who derive joy not in enjoying a work, but in complaining about how that work doesn't live up to their standards. So, it's whitewashing, it's
actually funny. Recently they started that whitewashing argument over a character that is indeed white, that Iron Fist show.
Oh yeah.
The character is a white man who travels to Asia and learns all that kung fu magic BS. That's the character. And then the show, they all accused it of whitewashing because it didn't change a white person to an Asian person in the show.
Yeah. No, it's just.
And it's funny, you see the review scores, and it's a 17% with critics, and it's an 88% with fans, with you know, just the amateur people.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can't, like, I think the Ghost in the Shell movie looks bad because Scarlett Johansson's a terrible actress. I don't think it looks bad because she's white.
Oh, of course. You know, and I haven't had the chance to see it yet, but I'll say, like,
yeah.
you know,
I kind of want to see it, but I have too much work to do.
I know that feeling too. I kind of want to just see it so I can talk about it, you know. But definitely the impression I'm getting is the quote unquote whitewashing actually plays a key point in the plot.
Is it? That sounds dumb. Okay.
Yeah. The key point being is in, like, they kind of changed up the character's original identity. That's about all I got out of it. And this is coming from someone who basically just read spoilers.
Well, the same people that complain about this as an example of whitewashing are the same people who, you know, want to turn any and every white male character into something else when they adapt it to film. You know, you can't have it both ways there. It's either okay to change the race of a character when you're adapting it to another medium, or it's not.
Oh, yeah.
I'm curious if there are any Japanese women who could have played that role.
I don't,
because I mean,
maybe, but I'm not.
You would need
none that are active in American cinema I know of.
Yeah.
You would need to be at least a moderately high-profile actress somewhere. You would need to be able to speak solid, unaccented English. I mean, there's got to be a couple, maybe, but I can't think of any.
Yeah.
It's funny, too, because places like the Mary Sue are running around saying, see, this shows that whitewashing doesn't work at the box office. And I'm like, well, then I guess that Ghostbusters reboot shows that your, you know, BS gender swapping doesn't either.
True. And I definitely think what's funny is a lot of outlets like the Mary Sue and Comic Book Resource, they're well, they seem to love the Ghostbusters reboot and absolutely hate the Ghost in the Shell movie for basically those reasons.
I mean, look, the Ghost in the Shell might be a bad adaptation, but I don't feel like it was made out of spite.
Right.
Like, the Ghostbusters movie was made out of spite. It was made out of, like, here's this thing that a bunch of people love. I'm going to take a piss on it.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that movie literally ends with shooting the logo in the dick. All right. They're not even subtle about it.
Oh, my God. Dude, I never went to see the thing, so I don't know the show.
I've seen enough pieces of it online, and I've seen the final scene, and there's a monster that looks just like the ghost in the logo, and they defeat it by shooting it in the dick because that's apparently a ghost's weakness.
Oh, really? They did that?
Yes, they shoot the blasters at the ghost in the crotch.
Wow, that's
just in case you didn't know what this movie's all about.
Not even subtle. Oh.
Ghost in the Shell it's just not a good thing to adapt to the US. It's just too complicated. I actually did a bunch of translation work on Ghost in the Shell when I was in college. It's just immensely complex. Yeah, the guy who did it was kind of a weird aside. The guy who did it, obviously made, more money than God by Japanese standards. Hugely successful international releases, 2 movies, TV series, very, very successful manga. And then he was like, I don't need any more money. I'm going to go write pornography now. And that's what he did. He just dropped the whole thing. Have either of you ever read any of the Ghost in the Shell manga?
I'm actually getting ready to read the first volume for a book club.
It is amazing. It is brilliant. The level of foresight involved is immense. He predicted that the U.S. would be involved in a civil war in Mexico due to its collapse from drug cartels in, I think, 2017 or 2018, and it looks like that's coming.
Wow.
Just absolutely amazing writing. And if you look, there are pages and pages of immensely detailed, hand-scribbled footnotes about the world, the mechanics. This character throws a grenade, and he'll go into great detail about how this is a modified Russian grenade, and these are all the different types of Russian grenades. It's this immense love for the work, and he dropped it all to go write really lousy pornography.
And to be fair, in the original cut of the first volume, I heard that there was a scene that was changed. I know the Major had like a lesbian sex scene in there.
Yeah, there's a lesbian scene in there, which was, I guess it was a foretaste of things to come. I don't think the guy's active anymore, but yeah, it's a very interesting. It's a very, very complex work that deals with a lot of complex themes, and you just can't do a movie with Scarlett Johansson, who is, like Bechtloff said, a pretty terrible actor, that, you know, deals with themes like, if you upload yourself into an AI, are you still really you? That sort of stuff, which that probably seems really freaking cliche now.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to remember, this thing came out, the thing was written in, I think, like 92. I think it like was written back in the days of bulletin boards, AOL days.
Right. Yeah, so that is pretty long ago. And it, you know, if you hear things about like the singularity, and it definitely has some foresight on that for sure.
Yeah, it predates the Ray Kurzweil singularity. We're going to upload ourselves into machines and become swarms of nanobots. What the hell Kurzweil was going on about back then. It predates that stuff by years. And it's too smart for Hollywood. It's too smart for Hollywood. So
cast Leslie Jones in it, you know, that way we wouldn't be whitewashing.
Yeah, that would have solved it. That would have solved all the problems.
That would have made it great. Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been good.
Poor guy.
Now, if there was something that you think that they could adapt, or that Hollywood could adapt, at least from you know, Japan, what do you think they should adapt, if anything at all?
That's a good question. That is a good question. I would say Attack on Titan, if you're familiar with that.
Oh yeah, I think that would be good. You could even have a mostly white or European cast, because
definitely.
Most of the cast is white or European.
Yeah, Attack on Titan would be good, because Bechtloff, are you familiar with Attack on Titan?
I've read the first volume of it. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Because, you know, it's big, it's dumb, it has a couple of obvious mysteries, and it's something that would work really good if you gave it a nice budget. There's nothing intellectual about it, as much as certain of its fans like to pretend there is. It's just people running around and stabbing giants in the back of the neck. I would think that would be an excellent, excellent thing to adapt.
Yeah. I definitely agree with you on that.
I'm sure it's one of the giants. Yes, that would work fine. Would work fine.
That'll be Hollywood in 2018. Leslie Jones must be in everything.
There was an ad for a fan-made ad for Donald Trump that featured Attack on Titan. And so it had all of the giants with sombreros, and the big wall, and the big giant peering over the wall has Trump's head plastered on it. It's amazing, but that's just a sign of how strong visually it is as an anime, and I think that would work very, very well as a Hollywood adaptation, much better than something like Ghost in the Shell, which is just too
Ghost in the Shell you'd almost have to do as like a Netflix miniseries or something, because it's just so dense.
That would work.
I mean, I don't see how that would work. There's certain things you just can't condense into a 90-minute movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, to some degree, I mean, you could just make the original thing shot for shot, because the original thing was a 90-minute movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's
So,
just
I
something
mean,
about Hollywood. They just seem to be slower
they
paced
can't.
in their storytelling these days.
Yeah, they can't do it. It's just they're not. Well, it's because you have to kind of animate this for, or not animate. You have to make the movie for the whole world. This thing has to air in China. It has to air, and that's why Hollywood movies are so dumb. Is you intellectual stuff does not translate well across cultures. Action stuff translates really well across cultures. Hayek talks about this actually in Road to Serfdom. Fucking weird place to talk about Hollywood movies or anything, but what he says is that everyone can appreciate stupid shit, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can all, you can have an IQ like 180 and you can still look at like, ow, my balls, or some guy getting hit in the groin and laugh at it, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's the lowest common denominator.
Lowest common denominator. But as you get more intelligent, or as you get more culturally specific, it gets harder and harder, and you're limiting your potential audience.
You know, as much as China might be dumbing things down, China is the one thing holding Hollywood back on the, PC, get rid of every white male you possibly can. Because the thing about China is they like seeing pretty white people. That they actually were almost not going to air the new or show the new Ghostbusters in China because it's just was full.
I thought they did.
They might not have, but
because it had ghosts, so you're not allowed to.
Well, no, one of the complaints was they don't want to show a movie full of ugly people there. That was an actual complaint. Like, no, people are too ugly. And I mean, yeah, you remake Ghostbusters with 3 lesbians and a gorilla, and not China's going to be like, nah, we don't want to see that.
Yeah, I can see that.
But they're one of the few things that's holding. I mean, Hollywood at this point is so converged, so SJW, that if we're up to them, a white male would never see the light of day again in that town. I mean, they just assume do it that way. But China likes seeing pretty white people in their movies that come from America. I guess
that makes sense.
In the same way that if you're seeing a movie from another culture, you want it to represent that culture, don't you?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, if you're seeing an American movie, you want to see Americans in it,
right? No, that's definitely a good point. And with all that being said on Ghost in the Shell, and being too smart for Hollywood to adapt, I think we can all be glad that Evangelion never got a Hollywood adaptation.
Yeah, I have still never seen the end of fucking Evangelion. I was going through my closet today. One of my coworkers gave me the DVDs 8 fucking years ago. I never finished it.
Oh,
I've heard the ending's a fucking train wreck.
Yeah, it's trippy. A friend of mine, which if you're watching, Quentin, we still talk about that. He showed the movie End of Evangelion to a bunch of people who had never even watched the series. And that was traumatizing.
Did they ever finish the remake?
We're still waiting on the 4th one. I know the director, he took a break to go work on a Godzilla movie.
Yeah.
And that's been completed. So I'm going to assume that they're hard in work on the last one. And hopefully they don't make us wait forever like they did with the 3rd one.
Well, that's what they do. The manga for that ran 15 years and just covered the same story as the anime.
That's kind of lame.
The anime that aired and ended in less than a year and 6 months is 26 eps.
Wow. Yeah.
It just came out one volume a year.
1 volume a year.
1 volume a year. Had absolutely beautiful artwork. Absolutely gorgeous artwork, because I guess when you can spend because the chapters would air quarterly.
Oh,
every quarter there would be 1 chapter. That was how I read it. I still haven't seen most of the anime.
Yeah, it's still a bit of a trip. It's definitely you know, I guess you could say thought provoking. That's psychologically, well, Freud would have fun with the series, that's for sure. And there's so many people that have done analysis. I'm not even going to get into it, just because it's insane.
When I was in Japan in college, I bought an essay book to celebrate some random Evangelion game coming. I think it was a shitty Evangelion game for PS2, and it had a bunch of retrospectives from fairly major players in the anime and manga industry talking about the effect Evangelion had on their life. And one was by a guy who would go on to work for Shonen Jump, which is the big manga place that does One Piece, Naruto, all that stuff. He was one of their fairly high-ranking editors. And he said that while it aired, he wrote approximately, I want to say about 2,000 pages of fan fiction while the thing aired, detailing the adventures that he had with who's the kind of quiet chick? Ayanami Ray, is that her name?
Yeah, it's Ray.
Yeah, Ray. Yeah, there's the kind of fiery, bitchy one, and then there's the quiet, autistic one. And I guess he fell so in love with. He wrote 2,000 pages of fan fiction describing his adventures with Ayanami Ray, and at the end of it, when the show aired, he didn't come out of his room for like months.
Wow. That
and
continue.
And this was not unheard of at the time. I don't think we've seen any shows like that since. It is truly a unique thing. I don't think we ever will. There have been anime that have been successful, but there's never been one since then that's been that level of societal phenomenon.
Right.
So
yeah.
It's its own unique thing. I don't think it's possible. I think that you can only have that kind of immense, any single work having an immense hold over a culture like that when the culture itself is still relatively young. If you look at, say, music, you see the Beatles, for instance. Beatles are good. Beatles are not, the best band ever in the history of whatever. Just when a art form, in that case rock and roll, is emerging, you're going to see a big hit like that. If Beatles came out today, no one would give a shit. Right. They would get lost in the noise. And so it's kind of sad because, there are very good, very interesting anime that are being made, and they're just never going to achieve that level of prominence again.
Yeah, I definitely think you're right on that. That's a good analogy with the Beatles there. Now, Chris, it seemed like you wanted to jump in there at a couple points.
I was just wondering, have you guys followed the ukulele shit show going on?
No, what's the ukulele shit show?
Well, it's that Kickstarter game that's supposed to be like Banjo and Kazooie. And
they have one that kicked JonTron out? Yeah,
they threw JonTron out of one of the voice roles. Because JonTron thinks that nations should have borders, so that makes him a Nazi.
Oh, jeez.
And so it finally came out, and just sure enough, just something about having social justice warriors work on something. They suck the life out of it. The reviews are mixed at best.
Unsurprising.
There's a lot of people who are just saying, eh. No, I mean, you could argue maybe some people are just soured because of and when people were getting uppity about it, like backers and stuff, like, hey, why are you doing this? I don't like this. Maybe I want a refund. They started turning into real assholes about everything.
That's unsurprising.
To the point of like making fun of their backers on Twitter and stuff. I mean, they were acting like absolute children about it.
Oh, jeez.
Well, we saw this story play out several times with Gamergate. Remember Mighty Number 9?
Oh, yeah, this is basically it's not as bad, but it's in that same vein as Mighty Number 9.
It's the same. Yeah, it's the same story. It's the same story of if you're focused on this social justice shit, you're not focused on the customer.
Oh yeah.
There have been times when I've been working on creative projects where I felt one had a transgender character in it. This was several years ago. And I felt that the audience for this particular work would be much happier if the transgender character was called she, even though it's a dude.
Mm-hmm.
And so I very dutifully, anytime he was referred to, he was called she. Just because when you're doing something that's audience oriented, you have to be oriented on your audience. Your opinions, your beliefs, they don't matter. The audience is what matters. And when you move away from that, you get a shit product.
Yeah. If you're an entertainer, I mean, it's fine to, that whatever kind of worldview you have seeps into what you're making. But first and foremost, your job is to entertain.
Mm-hmm.
And again, there's just something about the social justice mindset where I would argue it just sort of eats away at a person's soul. It eats away at any kind of real creativity they have. I mean, I've seen plenty of creators of various content who I once liked, and then they really get into the social justice stuff and they suck after that. They're terrible.
Social justice warrior stories are boring.
Mm-hmm.
They're not fun. And you can't look anywhere good for inspiration because, you can't look to Lovecraft. He's a racist, would be the big obvious example.
Oh, yeah.
Can't look to Conan. He's sexist. Can't look anywhere. And so you're left with pandering to a very, very tiny subset.
Well, I mean, here in the West, everything was made by straight white men.
Mm-hmm.
So when you get into this or that thing, what you end up doing is you're trying to dismantle it. Using that comics as an analogy, they're replacing every straight white man they can in there because they don't like that thing deep down. So they want to tear it down. They want to replace it with something that's in their twisted image.
Oh, yeah. I was going to backtrack a
That's
little
why
bit.
the Ghostbusters thing's a perfect example. That was about tearing this thing down that people liked because it was full of straight white men.
Very true. I was going to say I was going to backtrack a little bit, but I lost my train of thought for a moment.
All right. Well, what else do we have on the docket?
Well, now I forgot what it was again. I'll just go ahead and jump into this project that I've been working on. I know I told you about it, Sam. This is one thing I'm really trying to hype up, and that's why I'm bringing back my social media profile. A while back, I was thinking about writing a book, and one of the things I did, and this was when we were still writing for Reaxxion even, I started thinking like, gee, this is weird. How did I end up here? If somebody told me that I was going to get paid for writing, I would have laughed at them, years ago. And so I sort of thought about it and like, well, found my way onto Return of Kings, obviously. And I'm like, you know what? I went through this bad breakup a couple years ago, and I want to write a self-help book for guys who are going through breakups. And that's essentially my upcoming project. And I'm hoping it's pretty good. It's still pretty early on in the project, I would say. I had an earlier draft that I completely discarded and started from scratch. But now I'm at a point where it's really taken off again.
Sounds good. Do you think you are uniquely qualified to discuss the subject of breakups then?
Yeah, believe me. I know I haven't brought it to you guys, but I know, some of my close friends know that what I went through was about as bad as Vietnam meets the Hindenburg.
Good Lord.
And,
okay, give us some good breakup tips.
Some tips.
Give you a preview.
A preview? Okay. So for example, one of the things I really started out early on in the book is I talk about the pre-breakup scenario. And what the pre-breakup scenario is usually when your significant other asks for a break.
Mhm.
You know, so far from my experience and just about the experience of everyone I've talked to, when they ask for a break, it is basically a prelude to a breakup. It's going to end. It's going to end no matter what. So, if you want to try and save that relationship, the best thing you can do is sort of stand back. Don't engage. Don't be needy. Just focus on yourself. Go out with your friends. Have fun. Do that sort of thing. Improve yourself. Work out. It's pretty basic in that mindset. But I have some stories to back up that were just awful. It's funny talking about it now, but way back when it was pathetic.
How is it pathetic?
How is it pathetic? Like going on, this breakup happened around the time I was 21. So drinking was new to me. So I did a lot of drinking.
Okay.
And drinking leads to very bad decisions. Let me tell you that.
All right.
Among other things. So, I ended up, I had a lot of emotional moments while under the influence. I can tell you that. There is a section where, I go into I talk about a party that was just awful. It was actually a party that my ex-girlfriend had hosted with an insane gender ratio skewed in favor of her and her friend. And
So a lot of guys then?
yeah, a lot of guys. And it was kind of funny because it's like at least two guys didn't care. I think two guys were kind of clueless about why they were there. And then there was my close friend who, he was there to support me, and he had also kind of became friends with my ex. And I suspect, and there are people that are going to probably tell me I'm wrong, but I suspect she had the hots for him, but my friend wasn't having any part of it. And it's sort of become a funny thing to talk about. They ended up drunk on the couch, like holding hands at one point. And I don't even remember what was being said, but it was like, oh, don't worry about it. No, nothing else happened beyond that point, because I remember all of us guys had crashed downstairs, and I remember having to wake my friend up because he started throwing up in his sleep.
Okay.
So it's stuff like that. I guess the other thing I'll talk a little bit about is I made the dreaded mistake of working with my ex-girlfriend, and I stuck around at the same job for some time after. And yeah, you can see where that's kind of going. I had a couple talks from HR, and it turned out that she ended up dating another coworker of ours, and me and that guy, we did not get along at all, as you would imagine. So it's some stuff like that. I hate to say it, I had put myself in a cuckold position back then, and that's something I would advise nobody should do.
Okay. Well, hopefully they can buy the book and learn the secrets to not ending up that way. Bechtloff, do you have any good breakup stories?
Well, when I was that age, I was still dating my high school sweetheart, and her and I broke up and got back together more times than I could even count.
Wow.
Like we would break up, and then we kind of ended up hanging out with each other a lot. Like we just become so entangled in each other's lives. We were just like, well, I guess we'll just hang out. And then next thing you know, we're fucking. And then next thing you know, I guess we're just back together now. We'd reach a point where it's like we basically are acting like boyfriend and girlfriend. We might as well be. All right. And then I was young and dumb. So when I was dating her, I put up with a lot of her shit.
Oh,
I
yeah.
really shouldn't have. But when I wasn't dating her, I didn't tolerate her shit, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Looking back, I realized she needed me as a boyfriend to be more firm. And that's why we went through those cycles. But when we weren't dating, I didn't put up with her shit at all. I remember one time, like, we were at, some mid-level restaurant like Olive Garden or Applebee's or whatever, the stuff that's expensive for you when you're 21,
Oh, yeah.
And she's giving me a ration of shit about something. I don't even remember what it was. And I just like pulled out a 20 and I'm like, you know what? That's for my half. I've lost my appetite. And I walked out and left her there. And I drove her there.
Oh.
But she then calls me the next day and apologizes.
Nice.
And see, that's how I acted when we weren't dating. And that's probably how I should have acted more often when we were.
Yeah.
When we were dating, I'm like, well, that's my girlfriend now. I guess I got to tolerate more shit from her. But yeah, we went through that cycle. I couldn't even tell you how many damn times. Just constantly with that cycle. And again, eventually we just end up fucking again.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for me, it really wasn't a cycle. It was pretty constant, but I can definitely see what you're saying about needing to be more firm. It was, I probably tolerated more stuff than I should have. There was even one point where her mother had told me to smack her. If that's, if you want to get any indication of what that was.
Yeah, mothers, this reminded me of a story of a friend of mine. Let me tell you the story of my friend, and let's see what advice you would give him for breaking up. Okay?
Okay.
This was a kind of an overweight guy. He was very popular in college. Moved out of college, gained some weight, stopped. He had been in a band, quit being in a band, stopped having any luck with women. Now he's like 35, okay?
Mm-hmm.
He's getting older, and he finds out about this girl who he used to work with through Facebook, and she comes to him with a sob story. She's going to be thrown out of her house. She'll have nowhere to live. And she's going to starve to death on the streets. And so he says, well, you can come live with me. I have a house. And so she moves in. Girl is, let's say 12 years, early 20s.
Mm-hmm.
Very cute. And begins dangling the possibility of a relationship in front of him. So he is buying all her stuff. I believe I told you this story when we met in person. So he's buying her all this stuff. And eventually he begins to catch on. He begins to realize maybe she's like, well, I would date you, but you're too good for me.
Ooh.
You're too good a guy. I'm not worthy of you. And he's like, oh no, that's not true. That's not true. But finally, very slowly, the light begins to dawn in his mind that he is being used for free rent. And finally, he says, okay, you stayed here long enough. You have to get out. Got to leave tomorrow. Got to leave sometime in the future. Doesn't get a date, actually. And so the next morning, he's taking a shower. And he gets out of the shower a little earlier than usual.
Mm-hmm.
And just as he's about to open the door, he hears her on the phone saying, yeah, you can come today at 4:30. He'll be at work. I'll be here. I'll let you in. You can rob the place, take all his stuff, and then we'll just make it look like I wasn't here so I don't get in trouble.
Oh. Well.
And so, Bechtloff, were you going to say something?
No, sorry.
Oh, sorry. And so he says, I can hear you. I can hear you. And she says, no, actually, I was planning on robbing someone else's house, not your house. And it's okay for me to rob houses because I don't have any money. And naturally, he's not this dumb. No, you're going to rob my house, and you got to get out. You got to leave. So, having told her that she has to leave, he then proceeds to take her to Chipotle and buy her Chipotle.
Oh.
Then he takes her to get a haircut, and he buys her a haircut. And then, having bought her Chipotle and a haircut, he takes her home and says, okay, now you have to get out. So she proceeds to get out, and in the process, steals a bunch of his stuff.
Jeez.
He catches her, and he calls the cops. The officer comes to the door, talks to both of them. It's very obvious that, yes, she has in fact stolen his stuff. And the officer says to him, and he says to her, this girl does not actually like you. She is never, ever going to date you. She is just using her for you for free rent. And so the officer says to him, if you give me the word, I will take her down to the station right now, book her for theft. You will never see her again. And he says, no, I don't want to do that. And then, but I am going to evict her. So as she is evicted, she walks off with a bunch of PlayStation 4 controllers, a guitar, a laptop he needs for work. So now he's in danger of losing his job. And I think a couple other miscellaneous items. All in all, let's say about $700 worth of stuff.
Jeez.
For a guy who works pretty close to minimum wage. He's in a bunch of debt due to some other trouble. So $700, pretty damn big blow to him. He still, after having lost all this stuff, allows her to remain part of his life. After she gets kicked out, she gets on heroin. She gets on a heroin addiction, which maybe she already had, or maybe she picked it up after she got kicked out of her free rent at his place. And so now he's driving this heroin addict around in his car and just basically being a free chauffeur because she doesn't have anyone but me, and I need to show her that I am a good person and the bad people she's hanging out with are bad influences. So if I can just get her to see the light, she will stop listening to them and start listening to me.
Wow.
So what do you say to this guy?
Well, first of all, I say he blew it. He blew it a long time ago.
The mistakes were made a long time in the past. Yes, okay.
Yeah. At that point, it's pretty simple. You do say that he doesn't have a whole lot of money, because I would honestly be seeking legal remedies at this point. This is the whole legal scholar part of me coming out. $700, okay, small claims court. I would at least look at the cost benefits of the fees of that. I would probably sue her for the amount of money back. I would file a restraining order, and I would tell her, I'm like, look, you had your chance. Like, you're screwing up your own life here. I'm not going to be the one to bail you out. You don't have a place to stay. Go to a women's shelter.
That's a good point. Bechtloff, what do you think?
I would advise him to, next time he's driving her around, drive her as far away as he possibly can. Leave her in the middle of the nowhere.
Just leave her in the middle of nowhere.
Leave her in
Drop her off in a swamp or something.
Yeah, like get on the
Oh,
turnpike and leave her like directly between two exits. And then when you get home, then you file your restraining order. And hopefully she dies. And that'll be the end of it. Like, you didn't actually kill her. You're advised that you just threw somebody out of your car.
Yeah.
You know, if it came back to you, you could be like, I was just driving her somewhere and she started getting crazy and I had to just pull over and toss her out of my car. I don't know what happened to her. Just leave her to die.
That's good.
And I think that may be the best remedy. See,
you got to make sure you've driven at least 2 hours away from wherever it is you guys live. At least a 2-hour drive.
It was a 2-hour drive.
What he was saying, she was so stoned on heroin, she wouldn't even notice.
Yeah, you just be like, oh yeah, I'm taking you for ice cream. It's gonna be great. Oh, it's really good ice cream, weighing like 4 towns over.
I feel bad for the guy because he was a good friend, but good God.
Yeah. I totally get what you're saying.
I'm trying to think if I have any personal good breakup stories. I have this thing where, and I don't know what the cause of this is, but I will be really, really in love with a chick. And then just like someone flips a switch and I get bored, just like done. I remember one time I dated this. I would talk to her on the phone. This was in college, right? At least 7 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
And we would talk about this and that, our days, what TV we were watching, everything. And then one day I just decided I was tired.
Oh, wait, I got to stop you real quick. Somebody in the comments said about that girl, tell Hillary Clinton she knows something about her. Yeah, just announce publicly that she has information that can lead to Hillary Clinton's arrest.
I'll never see her again. You'll never see her again.
Oh man! Oh, these are good. I didn't even know that we had a live comment section.
I don't know where. How do I see the live comments section?
You got to go to the YouTube video. It'll be on the side.
Link it to me somehow.
Here, I'll throw it. I'll throw it to you on Skype.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, throw it to me on Skype. That'll be excellent. Okay, I might. See if I can do this without the audio feedback.
Like if you have your
I muted it in time. With a stake tied around her neck.
Drop her off in a swamp. You're Shrek's problem now.
Throw her in the ape and glow. Oh, we got all kinds of memes.
Wow.
Yeah, no, I don't. As far as I know, he never managed to even hold her hand.
Wow.
That's just. It's just so sad. And you kind of wonder what causes a person to be like that. What causes a person to be so utterly hopeless and blind to reality? What do you think, Robert? Why are some men so obviously blind to what is not only right in front of their noses, but what is beating them in the face with a baseball bat?
I think it's several things. I think that there's this sort of fantasy that, you guys have, this need to want to save the damsel in distress. And, it's a denial thing. It's that, and I think it's a scarcity mentality as well. Your friend you described, it sounded like at one point, like, it sounded like he was going somewhere. You're in a band. That alone, that's a good chick magnet right there. And it's just stuff happens, and but circling back to what I was saying about the fantasy, like, and definitely guys from our corner of the internet have begun to recognize it. It's it's just the fantasy. It becomes unhealthy. You want to feel like you're this in this altruistic situation where you're saving the day. I think that's what it comes from.
Corruption of a very good instinct. I mean, men naturally want to protect women. Every
Yeah.
boy grows up wanting to save the princess, but you can't save the princess from herself.
Can't
Very
save the
true.
princess from her own fucking heroin addiction.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's
I think
actually
he eventually did get rid of the girl, as far as I know. I remember what happened. She got arrested on a bunch of outstanding warrants.
Oh, nice.
And so now she is gone and out of his life, hopefully, until she makes bail. Thankfully, he didn't put up his own money to bail her out. I'm honestly surprised about that.
Oh God.
Well, again, let him know about my driving idea.
I will let him know.
He'll feel way better about it. Just 2 to 4 hour drive away, middle of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's a good hour walk to the nearest gas station for her.
Oh yeah.
It's just the fantasy bubble was so deep. I was walking in this little park near my house, and I was walking through it as I was talking to him. And when he told me that he went out and bought her, a haircut after she told him she was planning to rob the place, I started laughing so hard that all the birds in the park took off at once. So I am surrounded by gulls and pigeons and hawks and falcons flying up into the air because it's a bird preserve. It was like one of those John Woo movies with me buckling over in laughter in the middle of all these birds. But what he told me was, just because she said she was going to rob my place doesn't mean she was actually going to do it. You don't know for a fact that she would have gone through with it. You don't know that.
Yeah.
You can't say that.
That's what's the right word I'm looking for? That's rationalizing it, That's
it's living in it's like you said, it's living in a fantasy world.
Yeah. And that is really a lot of issues that come up. I mean, I don't know how much I can say about this because I know I'm kind of helping someone in a similar situation. At least this guy isn't being robbed. It's more of like, the person is married too. And, but yeah, I definitely get a sense that in that case that there's this sort of, fantasy world that some guys just buy in. It's just.
Well, this was a point that I had made back on Reaxxion a long time ago, and I always thought this was an enormously interesting point, but no one else ever seemed to care. So maybe it's really obvious or stupid, and I don't know. And I'd be interested to get you guys' thoughts on this. This was a post I'd written on why are so many men white knights, and the argument I made when I wrote it is that if you take an average guy from the past 20, 30 years, anybody who grew up from the video gaming generation, because we're all about the same age, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone who grew up in that generation, if you were a latchkey kid, your parents were divorced, you probably know more fictional female characters than you know real ones. If I were to ask a typical, when you were 14, could you name more fake girls that you knew, basically their personality, backstory, whatever, or real girls that you knew? Which were you interacting with more common? Fake girls being anybody from like Princess Leia. We were mentioning, Ayane Rei earlier. Tifa from Final Fantasy. Anything you see, any movie you see, any book you read is going to have a heroine in it. And those heroines are by and large going to be more or less perfect people. They don't have real personality flaws.
Right.
They're all good people. Otherwise, they wouldn't be the heroine. So out of all the women you know, some massive percentage of them really are perfect.
Yeah, that makes sense. I never thought of it
They're
that
not
way.
real, but they're still, you know, from your perspective, they're women, and you know basically who they are. You're more or less interacting with them, even if you're only watching them on a TV screen.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my theory, and it was completely ignored. I never saw anyone comment on it, so maybe it's not nearly as smart as I think it is.
No, that makes a lot of sense. You know, there's a lot of desocialization, period, and it's resulted in, you know, you don't know, and part of it's, you know, people don't. There's not as many siblings. I mean, nothing will demystify you on women more than having a sister.
That's a very good point, because I was curious. Do you guys have siblings?
I do not, but I
No.
Did you?
Every guy I know who has a sister that they grew up with knows,
because he does not
knows better.
Yeah, I have a sister, so maybe that's why I was kind of immune to this.
Mm-hmm.
One of the commenters points out that what socialization there is quite chaotic. That's very true. You don't have just groups of kids going out to play. It's very, I don't know, it's not good. And the lack of socialization, I think, is one of the big problems facing people of our generation. I don't know if it's better for the millennials. I honestly, because we're all kind of like on the border between Gen X and millennial.
Well, I think I might be more of a hard millennial than you guys are.
Well, yeah, I was 83, so yeah, I'm a young Gen X or an old millennial, depending on what metric you use.
And there seems to be a real kind of generational divide to people who came only a year or two after us. Maybe not so much Robert, but in
I definitely see it, because like I'm one of the last kids that, you know, we played outside. I mean, we had video games, but I would disappear outside and nobody knew where the hell I was for hours.
Yeah, I did that too.
You know, I would say I was probably around like the shift, because it's like, it seems like real early on in the childhood it would be like that, but then maybe around, you know, 7, 8, 9, 10 into the early teens, then it just became like a lot of indoor stuff.
Mm-hmm. I remember one time when I was 11 or 12, I'm riding my bike through this path in the woods that there was, because where I lived, things were very heavily developed, but it was also very dense woods wherever there wasn't development. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I'm riding my bike through this path in the woods, and I hit this like dirt mound right towards the end of it that, I mean, just flips me straight up. And you know, I wasn't wearing a helmet, which I probably would have broken my arm if I was, because I just instinctively threw my arm in front of my face because I was about to face plant. And I actually think I cracked a bone, because I remember it was extremely painful for a long time. Like, it was so painful, I walked my bike home, and like I just to like make it stop, I drew like a bath of like hot water and just sat behind it and like dunked my arm in it, like sat beside it. And I didn't tell my parents because I didn't want to get in trouble for dicking around out there, you know. But like, I remember what I was like, I'm on the ground, you know, and I'm sitting there and I'm thinking like, all right, well, you need to go home, Chris, because no one knows where you are, or you'll die here. Like, you know. And I mean, there's just none of that with kids anymore. You know, you can't leave your backyard without alarms going off.
Oh yeah. Well, I definitely feel like a lot of the kids I knew growing up were coddled a lot more. I can think of one neighbor kid. His parents were from England, and you know, they were teachers, so they definitely were, you know, very uptight about what was going on. And
I remember a few years ago, it was like one of the first times I decided that I was in a neighborhood where there was going to be trick or treating, and I'm like, I'm going to give out candy for the kids. It's going to be great, you know. I'm gonna.
Oh yeah, I used to fucking love that.
And then like kids start knocking on the freaking door, and I look outside and it's like light out, and I'm like, the hell's going on, right? And like it's time to trick or treat yet, and like I go out there, and I mean the sun is out. It is not even dusk, right? And these kids are out, and I'm like, what are you doing here? Well, I'm trick or treat. I'm like, it's like 5:30.
What the fuck are you doing?
Like, I wasn't even ready. You know what I mean? And then I realized that that's when they were doing it. They were finished by sundown.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, I don't want to do this again next year. Y'all kids suck.
It's
like,
just,
no, we didn't start till it was dark when I was a kid. Like we went out at 7 at the earliest.
So what time were they coming out at? Like 5?
It was like 5:30. Kids started showing up.
Oh jeez.
Like I wasn't ready.
Yeah, for us it was always 6 to 8. But we lived in a fairly northern latitude, so maybe that was.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
it was around 7 I would go out. I think some kids were doing it a touch earlier, but I think it was like because I lived in a very dense neighborhood, so I only did it for about an hour. Because I mean, I could fill, an hour of doing it, I could fill a giant pillowcase,
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, I lived in a condo, in SoCal when growing up, and that was, like I said, it was almost too safe. There was.
Well, one of the commenters, Star Spengler Banter, which is a fairly non-obvious name, says that the kids need to be out in the nighttime in their costumes to fool the spirits entering into our mortal planet, which is a good point and one that I hadn't really considered.
In which case, everyone's sucking at doing Halloween correctly.
But the more I think about it, the more I'm like, I guess I should be grateful they let the kids do it at all anymore.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. It is kind of the one day a year where you're supposed to take candy from strangers.
Oh yeah, I mean, all it takes is a special from 60 Minutes, and next thing you know, everyone's freaking out.
There's that one comic I saw on Facebook where a guy's standing at his front door like, "Hey kids, I have candy," and it says October 31st. It's completely acceptable, and then it's the same guy on November 1st, and it says completely unacceptable.
Yeah, that sounds about right. One of the others points out that you can't send kids out at night with so many third world illegals running around looking for easy prey. That's Mr. Tidal Wave.
Yeah, I guess with John Podesta running around out there, you never know if that's one of them kids up.
It's a very good point, though. If you look at the decline of social trust in America, it very much correlates with increased diversity. Diversity has been such an absolute disaster for the United States on every fucking level. You don't really realize it until you go overseas to a monoculture. I would see, like 10 p.m., I saw 9-year-olds getting on the fucking subway unaccompanied.
Oh.
No one bats an eye. No one bats an eye because what's going to happen to them? You would never see that in the U.S.
No.
Unless, pre-1965 or one of the Immigration Act was passed, you might have. But I think that's enough political. Since we are the video games site, what video games you guys playing recently?
Well, lately I've really I haven't bought anything new, so I've been playing a ton of Overwatch.
Overwatch is fun. It's got the problem that all of these fucking competitive FPSs do. I got a buddy, okay? Buddy's big Overwatch. And he's like, get this Overwatch and play. We'll go and play with my friends. His 4 friends all play this fucking game 4 hours a day. He plays it, 4 or 5. I'm just starting. I go into these matches, and I just get utterly fucking wrecked. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I don't know what the fire button is. And it's like, and so I'm getting my ass kicked, so I'm not having fun. The team is losing because, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. So they're not having fun. And the only remedy to this is for me to start playing Overwatch 5-6 hours a day, and then in 2 months, maybe I'll be able to play.
All right. And was that any kind of success there? Or?
No, because I don't want to spend 5 hours a day playing fucking Overwatch. It's not that good a game.
Understandable.
I got other stuff to play. What about you, Bechtloff?
Let's see. I've been meaning to get Breath of the Wild on the Wii U. I just haven't yet. I'm currently playing through Ocarina of Time on the 3DS, which is it's an incredible remake of it. It's probably the definitive version.
Nice.
I was also playing. There's a couple of indie games I got on the 3DS Switch shop or 3DS Virtual Shop called Mighty Switch Force 1 and 2. They're just little basic puzzle platformers that Way Forward put out. You know, that kind of cute babe art style they do with Shantae.
Yeah.
And also last night I just picked up Pac-Man World 2 for the PS2 because it was only like $8.
One of the commenters is playing Resident Evil playing, and I suggesting Resident Evil 7. Any of you guys touched that?
No, I've barely played any Resident Evils, to be honest.
Not yet. I have a friend that says he's going to get me the game as a gift, so I'm fingers crossed on that.
I sort of missed out on the 5th generation, I guess it was, the N64 PS1 generation. Because that was just I was a teenager and my dad didn't want to buy me video games anymore, and I already had comic books, so I already had one expensive mistress. And so I never really played Resident Evil 1, so I don't have any connection to it. The only one I ever played was I got an Xbox 360 around 2009 that came with Resident Evil 5. It was like a special red one. And I played Resident Evil 5 for about 10 minutes and lost interest. And went back to Arkham Arkham Asylum, which is the reason I bought it.
I was going to say, I think my first experience with Resident Evil was actually Resident Evil 4 on the GameCube.
That is a quality game.
And I didn't finish that, but I recently had finished an updated port for current gen.
Here's my deal. Also, the guy who's planning to play Persona 5, it's shit.
Oh.
Fuck Persona 5. I bought this thing because I like the other Personas, and I bought it all the way back in, God, it's been a while. I want to say like November, but it was probably earlier than that. And are any of you guys familiar with Persona games?
No, not really.
No, not too much.
The idea with the Persona games is there's this big old dungeon, okay? And at the end of the dungeon is a boss, but you can only spend so much time in the dungeon a day. Mm-hmm. So, because you're a school kid, you're going to school in a day, and at night you're delving into this dungeon. And at the end of however many days, you'll get kicked out of school, or maybe the world will blow up. Something bad will happen, it'll be game over. So it's a time management sim. Oof. It's a time management sim / RPG. And it's got this thing where it will tell you how other players are spending their days, because you can go into the dungeon, or you can work a part-time job, or you can go date a chick. You can do all this stuff. And what it will immediately show you is that everyone in the world is much better at this fucking game than you are. So you'll go in a dungeon, have some fun, and then the next day it will say 25% of players have beaten the final boss now. Next day after that will be 50, and you're still on like level 2. Wow. So I finally got so fucking sick of this game just continually telling me the entire world is better at you than this game, or at this game. And I just gave up entirely. It's not deleted from my PS4, but I haven't played it in months. And now it's coming out in the States, and I'm going to have to listen to everybody talking about this fucking game, and I hate it.
Well, that's one of the reasons I never cared for online play. Like, I like to play with, I'm a big fan of the couch co-op. If I want to play Mario Kart, I want to do it with my friend
definitely.
when he comes over. I don't want to race a 10-year-old in Korea, because the thing is, he's going to beat me because that's all he does.
Right.
I'm very, very good at Mario Kart. I am, I'm above average at Mario Kart, but in the world, I'm not. I'm very good at Mario Kart when it comes to all the people I know, even people that play it a lot. But when it comes to the 7 billion potential players on the planet, I'm at about a 6 out of 10.
Well, Persona is very much kind of set up for this kind of weird hybrid online offline play. Like, you can have other players will jump in and help you when you're fighting a tough boss, and the game is really fucking hard. So the difficulty is pitched with you being able to do this. So yes, you can turn it off, but that'll only make a difficult game even more difficult. So no, I'm not a fan of Persona. Also not a fan of Resident Evil 7. I'm wondering if I'm just not like a total pussy when it comes to video games. I don't think so. But like the thing with Resident Evil 7, you played 4, you played 5. It's kind of campy, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It's kind of it's kind of jokey, and the dialogue's funny, and you have a shotgun and maybe like 5 zombies running at you, flailing their arms, and you point the shotgun up, pull one blast, and all of their heads pop off at once. And this just immensely improbable display of ballistic strength. And it's goofy, and it's scary, but it's fun. 7, it seems like, dropped the goofy, and instead it's fucking Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh yeah, I know for a fact that was actually one of their influences on 7.
It was so plain from the trailers. The trailers aren't zombies. The trailer is you sitting in front of a bunch of fucking cannibals.
Mm-hmm.
There was it really seems to have taken inspiration from an older PS2 game called Demento, or I think in the US it was called Haunting Grounds, which was a kind of Resident Evil game, but the gimmick was there are no weapons. So it's just you running from these people who can fucking kill you in a couple hits, because I think in that game you're just some like teenage girl or some shit.
Right. And
sure, it's much scarier that way. It is much scarier to face a cannibal without a shotgun than with a shotgun. But it's a big departure from what the game is, or at least what the game is in my mind.
Now that I think about it, I'm kind of surprised there hasn't really been a Texas Chainsaw Massacre video game.
That's a good point.
Seems like it could. There was an Atari one, but it seems like that could make a really interesting survival horror game.
I think it's probably viewed, just the title is viewed as too campy. Survival horror people like to flatter themselves with their intellectuality. I'm playing this smart, sophisticated game like Amnesia or whatever.
Yeah, I guess you're right, but it would. I mean, most survival horror games have stories that are basically poor man's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It seems.
Oh, totally. Yes, totally.
But yeah, they like to imagine they're somehow above that.
Yes, I'm not one of you mouth breathers. I'm playing Call of Duty, but I don't have an attack button.
Ooh.
Is the kind of, I don't know. I'm not a big survival horror person. The last survival horror game I think I really liked was Clock Tower 3.
Oh yeah, I haven't played it, but I've heard of it. I know it's it was one that was made in Japan. You play as a little girl. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's the Clock Tower series, and the first Clock Tower series was you running from Scissor Man, who is a midget with a 3-foot-tall midget with a 5-foot-tall thing of scissors.
Mm-hmm.
And he runs at you, and if he catches you, he'll scissor you up.
Oh.
3 was slightly more sophisticated. It was running and running and running, and I think there was like each stage there would be a different serial killer. So the first one was this big kind of hulking brute. The second was a guy who would spray acid in people's eyes to melt their brains and all this shit. But at the end of every level, when you had completed whatever stupid crap and side quests you had to do, you got to fight the boss. So you spent 2 hours running from this acid spraying serial killer. And then at the end of it, you take this giant glowing bow of light and just jam an arrow right in his face. And it was the most cathartic thing ever.
Ooh.
So that was a lot of fun. One of the commenters points out that Silent Hill fans are that kind of douchey in particular, which I think is a fair point, particularly for the later Silent Hills.
Yeah. I've actually never played Silent Hill. The extent of my survival horror goes to just Resident Evil.
Well, it's one of those. It's kind of a niche genre. It's a shame that the 7 kind of went that route because it's basically the only game out for the PSVR. I was talking to a game developer who's trying to do stuff for the PSVR, and he's like, "Yeah, no one's making any games, which means no one buys the hardware, which means that no one makes any games for it because no one has the hardware." So it's kind of falling short from its potential, unfortunately, which is very disappointing because PSVR is very cool. Have either of you guys ever tried a VR game?
I can't say I have.
I would highly recommend the experience. You guys know Quake, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there is kind of a fan patch or remake or something. I think we may have lost
Oh,
Robert. I think we may. He'll come back.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, I don't know what happened there. I think it's just a hiccup.
So you can play Quake in virtual reality. The original Quake from the late 90s or mid early 90s. I forget when Quake came out. And there's a spot in Quake where you got to dive into this mucky, yucky-looking water that's about as nasty as, a fucking DOS game can make water look.
Ooh.
And, when you're playing this in 2D, you don't give a shit. You just run right into the water, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Who cares, right?
Right.
3D, I didn't want to go in that fucking water. I was like, this is disgusting. I'm going to get that nasty-ass water on me. Which, is different. I don't think that, there's a lot of really scary shit out for VR. I don't find that particularly impressive, but if you can make scary shit, for a typical 2D or just TV game, right? Resident Evil 7, pretty fucking scary, right?
Right.
It's scary in 2D, it's scary in 3D. But that experience of just like disgust was something I had never had in a video game before. And it was only possible because you really feel like you're there. You really feel like you're the Quake dude. Or you can be Doom guy. Doom's not quite as fun because I don't think you can lift your head up or whatever. So it's not quite as good. But Quake is definitely a fascinating experience. And I would highly recommend it. But
what's the hardware on those things cost, though?
The Quake is a Oculus Rift game, or not?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Gear VR. Gear VR. It's Gear VR. So what you do is
but what's
you guys
the Oculus Rift stuff running for now, or is it just
Oculus Rift is PC, but the Gear VR is cell phone. So you buy this little headset. Headset's about $80-$90, and then you plug your phone into it. And it's really affordable. The graphics are amazing. Then, and just unfortunately, there's not a lot of selection of games, but you can play Minecraft on it. VR Minecraft is a trip.
I could imagine that.
It's a lot of fun.
So then it would be a matter of having a cell phone that can handle all those games.
Which is, the requirements aren't particularly heavy.
It sounds like they're not games run on a lot. I mean, you know, Quake, I mean, that's a 20-year-old game. You know?
Yeah.
That is true.
You know,
so
these days you can run Quake on your watch.
Yes. Samsung S5, Galaxy S5 or higher, I think. So, and those are fairly old phones at this point. I mean, the S8 just came out today or something, or maybe not today, sometime in the future or sometime in the recent past. So, it's really, really an underappreciated kind of thing, and it's very sad that it's failing to gain traction. Of course, the reason it's failing to gain traction is that everybody's thinking, okay, you want to do VR, you need the Oculus Rift or the HTC Vive, both of which cost about what's it, $600 to $800.
Ooh, yeah.
Not going to spend that much money for systems which don't have a lot of games on it, but you can shell out 80. 80 is not a lot of money.
No.
For what's practically a whole new system. Yeah.
And I was going to say, have any VR arcades opened up near you guys?
No, I saw one in Akihabara, but not here. That maybe.
I'm actually surprised. You know, there's one that actually opened up a couple towns away from where I'm currently living, and it came out of nowhere. I haven't checked it out yet, but it seems like it might be worth a trip at some point. I'll definitely give an impression on that when I do.
Yeah, I would be curious to know what you thought about it, because VR is something that benefits a lot from peripherals. Mm-hmm. Anything that makes you feel more like you're there.
Oh yeah.
The only thing we got in my area is we got some place called Timeline Arcade, which is it's one of those, and I've seen a few of these pop up, where it's a bunch of old machines, and they're all free to play, and they charge you by the hour to be in there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that sounds like it's kind of like with this arcade. It is a charge by the hour, except with the VR headsets there.
One thing I like, which unfortunately I haven't had as much time to do recently because I've been so busy with all the stupid shit I'm doing, is you can actually get PS1 and PSP emulators and play them in virtual reality. Which is, it's not true virtual reality. It's just a kind of fake 3D. It's like playing it on a TV screen that's covers your whole field of vision. But even that is immensely more immersive. It's now like the only way I will play those games. Also, if you're playing an emulator, it's free.
That's pretty cool.
It's free as in stealing, but this
you have
the PS1 is a 20-year-old system now.
Very true.
No one gives a shit. You're not stealing Mario Maker. I was actually going to ask you, Bechtloff. I got a Wii U. Like a Wii U. What kind of stuff should I get? Right now, I've got Xenoblade Chronicles, the Fatal Frame one, the Fire Emblem game, Bayonetta, and I think that's it. What's some other shit I should get?
If you at all like Mario, I highly suggest Mario Maker because it's a blast. In fact, as much as I hate online stuff generally, I don't want to play people online. Mario Maker is the first time I ever bothered to hook a console up online. That's because I mean, otherwise it's basically a worthless game without it. But games I got on it right now. And my Wii U is actually kind of busted because the gamepad like has no range now, so I got to get a new gamepad. But the stuff I got on it, I really like. Captain Toad's kind of a fun little new game series Nintendo put out, sort of a puzzle platformer. Let's see what else. Smash Brothers is Smash Brothers is Smash Brothers, Mario Kart 8 is, I think, the best in the series. So if you at all like Mario Kart, I would suggest getting 8. Some of the music in it is incredible. The one music in the one new Haunted Mansion level, I mean, it sounds like something you'd hear in like a Tim Burton movie 20 years ago. Back when Tim Burton movies were worth seeing. Let's see. I got 3D World. Mario 3D World's really good. But I mean, it's basically all going to be. That's the thing with the Wii U. There's a lot of great games on it, but it's basically almost all Nintendo IPs. I mean,
it's fine by me.
I mean, but there's some great Mario games on there. Yoshi's Woolly World's a lot of fun. Hyrule Warriors is. It really didn't get a proper Zelda game until Breath of the Wild, which is both systems. It's in the Switch. Hyrule Warriors is fun if you like Dynasty Warriors, but I mean, I didn't actually make it through it because it's one of those things where it like started off really fun and then it was like trying to eat a whole chocolate cake. You know what I mean?
That's all Dynasty Warriors.
It's like at first it's really awesome, and then like halfway through it, you're like, I hate myself. But if you like Dynasty Warriors, Hyrule Warriors is definitely something to get. Mario Maker is a blast. I have a few levels out myself. But
see, the impression I always got with Mario Maker, and this probably isn't fair, is that all of the levels are just like insanely high difficulty.
That's not really true. I mean, like, just by the nature of Mario Maker, you're going to be dealing with a lot of crap. But that said, I mean, you play the 100 Mario challenge, and you'll get random levels, and you can do the easy mode or like the normal mode and then the hard mode. Like you can pick levels based on how many people have completed them. There is a lot of crap. I mean, there's obviously going to be kids that just throw out anything. There's way too many of the freaking auto levels. Like there's levels where it's like you don't touch anything and it's just this elaborate like Rube Goldberg machine that gets you to the end without you touching a single button. And those were really, really cool for the first few days that Mario Maker was out. And then it's like after that it's like, okay, enough of this crap. But yeah, it's hard. You got to look, but there's really, really good creative levels on there. There's a lot of people who are like absolutely dickish about it. I mean, I don't know how else to put it, but like I never tried to be that way with my levels. I tried to make mine just fun, like not really easy, but just fun. But yeah, you don't. It's not all that. It's not all going to be. Some 10-year-old in Korea made this perfect platforming challenge that.
Yeah. So which is the Mario that's like kind of like Mario 64? Because I bought a Mario and it turned out to be a fucking 2D Mario and I was pissed.
Well, what Mario didn't get the 3D platformer Mario got this time was 3D World, which it's full 3D, but the levels are almost play out a little bit like a 2D level. It's almost like if you took a 2D Mario level and just imagined what it would actually look like in 3 dimensions. It's almost like 2.5D in how its gameplay is, but it is really, really good. And it's one of the first Mario games in a long time where you can play as Toad and Princess Peach, like the American Mario 2. So I kind of like that. I like being able to play as characters that you don't normally get to play as.
Look at that. I've been playing fucking Mario Run. You guys have you played Mario Run?
I haven't. I don't really have any games on my phone, but I've heard pretty good things about it.
Mario Run is fucking Hitler.
It's Hitler.
This fucking game it's just addictive enough that you can't put it down. But it is, in terms of how unforgiving it is, it's a bite-sized Dark Souls.
Whoa.
If you just want to get to the end of the level and beat the game, it is the easiest game in the world. A 2-year-old could do it. Because the idea is you have one button, and that button is jump. That is all
it's
you
one of
can
those
do.
kind of runner. You're just always running.
Yeah. And you can occasionally, depending on your character, you can hold jump. So you can maybe float a little if you're Yoshi. Sounds easy enough, right?
Right. I'm waiting for the hard part.
If you want to do the challenges, you have to get the special colored coins that are scattered through each level. And because you are constantly running right, if you fuck up, then you get one shot at the coin. It's above you. You mistime your jump, no coin for you, back to the start of the level because you have to get all 5 of them.
Oh.
And then there's the PvP. If you want to unlock characters or really do much of anything in the game beyond beat it, you have to do the PvP, which is playing the levels competitively. So it will put you against another player's ghost. And you will see who can get more coins and more style points by doing moves. And if you win, you take some of their toads. You have a kingdom which is populated by toads. You get 50 blue toads or toadstools, then you get blue Yoshi. You get 50 green toadstools, you get Luigi. If you fail, you will lose toadstools. So if I'll go play someone, I'll race against their ghost, and if I win, I get 10. If I lose 10. Except the game has a matchmaking system. So it will constantly pitch you against people who are your skill level. So even if you get better, the game will get harder to compensate. Which you can imagine how much of a pain in the ass that is when you're trying to unlock these characters. Because you essentially need, for like 5 games, 100% win rate. So it's got that going for it, but it's just fun enough that you can't put it away. It's still Nintendo. It's still amazingly well made, and so you can't put the fucking game down. So I would advise you all to stay away from Mario Run because it's addicting and will eat up your life.
Wow. I have to ask, are there any microtransactions with it?
No. You pay your $10, you get the game.
Oh, so it's a paid game. Wow.
It is
okay.
it is a free-to-play game, and you can progress through it free-to-play-ish by getting all these stupid coins. Or you can just buy it and it will let you progress. So to get through World 1, you can either buy the game and then beat World 1 and go to World 2, or you can free to play, beat World 1, get all the stupid hidden coins, and then you can go to World 2. But it's much easier to just pay $10. Supposedly Nintendo is not having excellent sales with it because it's not the typical market.
Yeah, I've heard the sales were less than they expected, but at the same time, I mean, they did respectable. I mean,
I'm sure it was
you
fine.
got to kind of watch it with some of the gaming media because the gaming press always has it out for Nintendo. I mean, anytime there's the slightest, the slightest slip with them is Nintendo is doomed. They. Well, guys, I hate to bail, but I got to get going. I got some stuff I got to do in the morning, so I'm gonna have to bail out early on you.
No problem. I was thinking about
sounds good.
wrapping it up here soon.
Thanks,
Anyways, so.
thanks for having me on, though. I appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. I hope to have you back in the future, and I hope to
Certainly.
keep in contact. So,
Yeah, definitely.
anytime. All right.
Good.
Any last minute things you want to talk about here, or?
Nope, I saw we lost 3 viewers as soon as Bechtloff said he was going. So we know who everybody else came to see. It's down to 4. Thank you, remaining 4, for not running out and ditching us. It's appreciated. It's
All right.
much appreciated. Hope to see you again.
All right, and I'm just going to close this out with one last thing. I'm hoping if with this becoming a regular thing that I have a few segments here. I have to say, music pick of the week, Mastodon's new album, Empire of Sand. I haven't listened to the thing start to finish, but so far I like what I'm hearing. The lead single off of it, Show Yourself, definitely worth a look, if you're into metal and hard rock. Any music picks for you, Sam?
Music picks. That's a good question. What have I been listening to recently? God, I've been on this podcast too long. I can't even think. No, I'll pass on that for this time, I think. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Thanks for coming on. And, if you viewers liked it, there will be more of these in the future. And stay tuned to my channel. Thank you and good night.
Bye-bye.